Good morning and welcome to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus quarterly web meeting, Federal, State, and Provincial Legislative Review. I'm Lisa Hanairo. I work for the Council of State Governments and I direct the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus. We'll start with some housekeeping to help you understand how to interact. First of all, this event is being recorded and the recording will be available later today at the caucus's website, which is at greatlakeslegislators.org. To reduce the noise on our phone lines, everybody's in listen only mode right now, but I will be able to unmute your line when it comes time for Q&A, or you can type questions. You can either type them in the questions panel of GoToWebinar, or you can email me at glc@csg.org and I'll be able to read your question if you'd rather speak, or for the executive committee members who are coming up later on to give reports on their jurisdictions, just go ahead and you can raise your hand and I will unmute your line. If you do want to speak, you must enter your audio PIN, and I'll be able to see from my control panel whose PIN is not entered, so you might get a pop-up message from me if you need to enter your audio PIN. And now, here is the agenda for today. I'm going to turn the floor over to Senator Ed Charbonneau, the GLLC chair, for the introduction of our featured speaker.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone who's on the line for joining our webinar meeting today. Once again, Lisa's put together a pretty tight time frame or schedule for the meeting, so I'm going to skip most everything and just remind everyone that caucus, I guess a little advertisement, is the only binational nonpartisan organization dedicated solely to educating, engaging, and serving state and provincial legislators from the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River region. We're organized around the guiding principle of assuring that the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River continue to provide a plentiful source of clean, safe, affordable drinking water to our region's residents, businesses, and industry. Any legislator who happens to be on the line and is not yet a member of the GLLC, we welcome you and ask that you learn more about our organization. And you're welcome to enroll as a member by visiting our website at greatlakeslegislators.org. No cost becoming a member, and I can assure you there are many benefits that you'll receive. On today's quarterly web meeting, we're featuring our annual review of legislation and funding measures being considered at the federal level, as well as in the states and provinces. Our speaker on federal legislation in the United States is Matthew McKenna from the Northeast Midwest Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy organization based in Washington, D.C. Mr. McKenna is the director of the Great Lakes program for the Northeast Midwest Institute, and his role is to work with congressional offices and administrative agencies on the Great Lakes protection and restoration programs and initiatives. Mr. McKenna is a frequent speaker on our web meetings, so we welcome him back. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Senator. I really appreciate the kind words and introduction. Again, my name is Matt McKenna. I'm the director of the Great Lakes Washington program at the Northeast Midwest Institute, and I know I've spoken on some of your previous calls. I'm very happy to be able to join again and give a brief update on what's going on here in Washington. Lisa, you can go to the next slide, please. So I just thought it'd be helpful to quickly give an update on some of the changes that occurred at the beginning of this Congress with the new House majority. The region actually gained a lot of clout with new chair people of, especially of the appropriations subcommittees. The defense subcommittee, the new chair is Pete Piotrowski from Indiana. Defense obviously is the largest appropriations bill, so it's one of the most prestigious subcommittees to be chair of. The Energy and Water Subcommittee, which is really essential because it funds the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, is now being headed by Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur from Toledo, Ohio. So she actually is going to be very instrumental in determining how funds are distributed to the Army Corps for their upcoming projects. And obviously, Great Lakes region has a lot of key Army Corps projects that are moving forward. So it's a big benefit to the region to have her in her current position. And then also the House Interior Environment Subcommittee is going to be chaired by Congresswoman Betty McCollum. Her district isn't actually in the Great Lakes Basin, but she's from Minnesota, obviously. But she's been a real champion of a lot of Great Lakes issues and a great friend to the region. And then her colleague and ranking member on this subcommittee is Dave Joyce from the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. He's been one of the great champions of Great Lakes issues, being an original sponsor of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative legislation that actually formally authorized the bill. So it's a great duo to have atop of the subcommittee that deals with the EPA's budget and also the Department of Interior. And then also I just wanted to mention that Senator Dick Durbin continues to be the ranking Democrat on the Defense Subcommittee, and again, being one of the more prestigious subcommittee assignments in the Congress. Lisa, next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a brief overview on where we're at with the 2020 appropriations process. We got off to a little bit of a delayed start due to the extended government shutdown that happened over December into January. But the House has actually really gotten back on track on trying to get their appropriations process through. Currently, the House has moved 10 out of the 12 appropriation bills through the full committee, and is expecting to bring up 5 of them in a minibus bill next week. Those bills, and the appropriations bill that's most pertinent to kind of Great Lakes issues in this package is the Energy and Water appropriations bill, which will be debated by the House likely next week among this package of appropriation legislation. On the Senate side, the Senate is quite not as far along as the House. The Senate, they have not marked up any of their draft bills yet. They're continuing to hold oversight hearings. Basically, the Senate right now is looking to try to come together in a bipartisan manner to create some sort of budget deal with the administration to set spending caps, which the House has already done independently for FY21 and 22. If they aren't able to come to a deal, I think a lot of experts think that it's likely the Senate might continue funding everything at FY19 levels, the current levels. There's a chance they could try to increase some of the caps, but I think it's probably more likely that they will operate at the current spending levels. But I do think that they're really pushing forward. Both the Republican and Democratic leadership are trying to forge ahead with a deal to get new spending caps for the next 2 years. Next slide, please. So quickly, there's some great Great Lakes provisions in the House Interior Appropriations Bill that's been approved by the full committee. The House Interior Bill will not be on the floor next week, but it could be on the floor as early as 2 weeks from now. It could be included in another minibus package. First off, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is slated to get a significant increase from where it is in the FY19 budget. Obviously, in FY19, $300 million was included. The original House bill, when introduced at the committee level, had $305 million slated. But when the full committee took up the bill, they actually increased it to $320 million. There is report language that does call on the EPA to make sure that they provide at least $15 million of that $320 million for tribal-related activities. Additionally, language is included to support the work that EPA and other agencies through GLRI are doing to reduce the growth of harmful algal blooms, especially as it relates to toxicity in drinking water. And then also, and something I will get more into a little bit later, it does include language that notes that the VETA bill, that was the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act that was passed last fall, included language regarding creating a program for the Great Lakes and Lake Champlain regarding invasive species, and that the appropriate regional geographic programs should support this initiative. So that would include the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, but there is also a Lake Champlain regional program within EPA. So I do feel that there would be hopefully some support for the invasive species program through there. Just quickly, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they included $11.6 million for Asian carp control. Out of that $11.6 million, $2 million is to be used to expand use to contract fishing. And then also the USGS is slated to receive $8.62 million for Asian carp, of which $3 million specified to study grass carp, especially in Lake Erie. An additional about $5 million is included for harmful algal bloom research. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to touch upon a couple of the other major accounts that I know I have listed in Interior, but these are really mostly all in EPA, Interior Appropriations Bill. The state revolving funds have seen significant resource increases, the clean water being almost $1.8 billion and drinking water revolving fund at $1.3 billion. Additionally, the House included pretty significant allocations for some of EPA's categorical grants meant at water pollution, including the Clean Water State grant of $240 million, sewer overflow grants that were authorized through the last water process are slated to receive $9 million in the House bill. And then the non-point source solution grants, so the Section 319 grants, are slated to receive about $176 million. So it's pretty significant resources that Congress is looking to provide EPA for water pollution control. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, the FY20 Energy and Water Appropriations Bill is slated to be on the floor next week. Currently, the Rules Committee is accepting amendments from members to consider floor debate. I went through this morning and not seen any Great Lakes relevant amendments introduced yet. That doesn't mean they won't be. But right now, I think a lot of the focus is on some of the other sections of the bill. Some large bills are included in this minibus, including the labor HHS, which is the largest domestic spending bill, and I believe the defense bill is included in this minibus as well. So it's a very large appropriations bill, and it likely will take the House most of next week to get through it. A couple quick provisions that were included in the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, and again, this is the subcommittee that's chaired by Congresswoman Cafter, so there's a lot of stress on Great Lakes issues. The bill includes for the Glimmerous study $50,000, which is what the Army Corps requested from Congress. They also provided almost $14 million for the operation of the electric barrier, which is right outside Chicago. They provided the full request that the Corps submitted to Congress. On the Asian carp front, and this I think is probably one of the areas of greatest interest to the people on the call today, the bill actually increases an account called the investigations account in the Army Corps' budget. Because earmark rules are not allowed to specifically specify what this increase is used for, but the report does mention the Brendan Road recommended plan and does specifically state that it's eligible to receive funds through this increase in the investigation count. And it also calls on the Corps to prioritize projects, especially ones it considers critical to prevent the spread of invasive species with this additional fund. So this will actually provide the opportunity for the Army Corps to potentially include in their FY20 work plan, which I'll go into a little bit more details on my next slide. But there's the opportunity to start funding the pre-construction engineering and design phase, which is a phase that the Army Corps can move to right now. So if everything went on plan and the Army Corps included the Brendan Road project in their work plan, there's opportunity for them to start, even without a full authorization, some of the work and planning by October this year. So I think that's a pretty significant move forward on that project. Additionally, $75.5 million were included for the construction of the new Sioux Lock, new post-size lock up in the Mackinac Straits, which I know has been a very major priority for a lot of people throughout the region. And then I just listed there's report language regarding the recent Midwest flooding and coastal resiliency study. There are no funds directed towards the resiliency study for the Great Lakes as of yet. That will likely have to be included in the FY20 Army Corps' work plan as well. And obviously, it was not included in FY19, but I'm happy to discuss that more if you have questions. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to briefly go through what the projected Brandon Road timeline is, just because it's been one of the bigger significant things that's happened here in Washington. Is that last month the chief of engineers at the Army Corps signed the chief's report and sent it to Congress, which is the first big step for Congress to go through the authorization program. As I mentioned before, Congress included funds for included an increase in funds for the investigations account, which is the account that would provide funding for the pre-construction engineering and design, or PED, funds. As I mentioned before, in order for the Corps to start this, it will have to be included in their FY20 work plan. Just to give some perspective on time, if Congress is able to pass the Energy and Water Bill on time before September 30th and not be operating on a CR or anything like that, the Army Corps would likely release a work plan sometime in October. If they made funding available for the Brandon Road PED phase, they would begin that actual work, and they project that work will last for 3 years through 2022. The next step, if everything remains on the timeline, that it's an optimistic timeline, I'm not going to lie about that, but in 2020, it's likely Congress would begin a new Water Resource Development Act authorization process, which is the legislative vehicle and how Army Corps of Engineer projects get authorized. Congress basically considers these WRDA bills every 2 years. So if Congress were able to authorize the Brandon Road recommended plan, the next step would be that in 2020, after the authorization was signed into law, the Corps, pending obviously the authorization and also future appropriations, could start implementing the non-structural plan for the Brandon Road recommended plan. And then after they finish the PED stage in 2022, again, this is dependent on authorization and then future appropriations, they could start construction, and likely they project that construction will last through October 2028. So that is kind of the preliminary timeline the Corps has been giving to stakeholders and to folks here in Washington. Obviously, that schedule can change depending on what Congress is able to do, depending on the appropriations process. If we have another prolonged shutdown and the Army Corps somehow got dragged into that, that would delay things. Next slide, please. I also just want to quickly touch base on just general infrastructure bills. I know that's been a topic of much discussion, especially with the new Congress, and people talk about, well, what could a split Congress, a Democrat-run House and a Republican-run Senate really accomplish? And one of the major areas people felt that there could be some potential for compromises on massive infrastructure bills. A comprehensive infrastructure package is looking very unlikely. Recent developments are this Democratic leadership are pushing for a $2 trillion package, but talks between them and the administration sort of broken down. I think there's been a lot of politics thrown into the middle, which has made it more difficult. So from what I've been gathering, especially on the House side, I think Democratic leadership feel that the next way forward would not be a really big, holistic, comprehensive infrastructure plan, but going the more traditional surface transportation bill route, which is due to be up next October 2020. So yes, next, well, 2 Octobers. And that's kind of your highway, the highway trust fund, all of that stuff is typically, and transit accounts are wrapped up in that process. And that would go through the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. So I think that's probably the vehicle that you're going to see some sort of infrastructure package move in the future. Obviously, those are relatively big deals. They're either 5 or 6 year authorizations, and they can get pretty tricky, but they normally are a bipartisan effort. So obviously 2020 will be an election year, so it's certainly not a slam dunk, but I would not be surprised if you saw WRDA and also Surface Transportation Bill of 2020 being kind of the major legislative vehicles moving forward. Then I also just wanted to touch upon the Leading Infrastructure for Tomorrow's Lift America Act. It was a bill, or is a bill, that was introduced by the Energy and Commerce Democrats, and it's kind of a lot of infrastructure that's outside the transportation realm. And it's a bill that I think could gather some momentum, probably not this year, but depending on what happens in 2020 and beyond, I feel like it's a good indicator of some of the priorities on other infrastructure, and it includes money directly for drinking water infrastructure, which I know in the Great Lakes region that's had some real water catastrophes, such as Flint, Michigan. It's a real priority, but also increasing energy infrastructure investments and brownfield redevelopment. I think there's a lot of positive stuff, and so I just wanted to highlight that for you, that to let you know that's kind of a big comprehensive bill that's outside the transportation realm, really focusing on some of the infrastructure needs in America. Next slide, please. And then finally, I had mentioned VETA before, the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act. I just want to quickly go through it because I know it's been a priority for a lot of the folks in the Legislative Caucus, and it's been an issue that's been on Washington's agenda for a long time. And over the fall, the Congress passed the Coast Guard authorization that was that included the VETA bill, a modified VETA bill. The original VETA bill basically put all the ballast water regulation into the Coast Guard, removed its jurisdiction from EPA for the states. This bipartisan agreement that was reached over the fall continues the dual regulation regime of ballast water, but it gives EPA the lead in establishing national standards for discharges. But then it provides the Coast Guard with a primary role for monitoring and enforcing these standards and ensuring vessel safety. A particular note, Senators Stabenow and Portman, who are both the co-chairs of the Great Lakes Task Force, worked diligently trying to get specific measures into the legislation for the Great Lakes and to protect the Great Lakes. And they were able to achieve this. The three major provisions that they included, the first one that I mentioned through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative process, is that they got a program authorized for $50 million annually for a new Great Lakes monitoring program within EPA's Great Lakes National Program Office, and that will be targeted invasive species. And there's a whole list of different objectives that this new program has, and I'm happy to share that with everyone. The Northeast West Institute does have a brief fact sheet overviewing the VETA provisions, especially as it relates to the Great Lakes. Additionally, they included language that allows the Great Lakes states to cooperatively establish unique and more stringent ballast water standards or best management practices, which obviously has been, the VETA bill does take, remove states, some of the states' regulations, but provides the Great Lakes with a mechanism to be able to revisit federal standards if they don't think the federal standards are strong enough to protect the Great Lakes. So it's a very important provision that I know that both the Senators Portman and Stabenow were very adamant about making sure that proper protections were in place for the Great Lakes. And then finally, it authorizes $5 million per year for the Great Lakes Commission to be a convener on ballast water discharge regulations and really help administer when there is a dispute by a governor regarding federal standards for ballast water discharges. So it provides an actual kind of a middleman or clearinghouse for the states to go to when they feel that maybe a federal regulation isn't strong enough or doesn't address an issue that's specific to the Great Lakes. So with that, I think I can open it up to any questions that anyone has.
Matt, thank you very much for the presentation. If I could real quickly, very early on you mentioned Asian carp.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back and where are we with getting something done?
Sorry, Senator, could you just repeat that last part?
Yeah, where are we with, how close are we to getting something passed to deal with the Asian carp?
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest steps I feel that's just recently happened was that the state of Illinois had submitted a letter to the Army Corps, and the Army Corps accepted it as a letter of non-federal sponsorship. Obviously, there's still some things to be hashed out, but a big movement forward was when General Semonite signed the chief's report and sent it to Congress. So it starts the process that project can go through the WRDA process, which is coming up next year. Additionally, the House Appropriations Committees provided pretty ample funding for Fish and Wildlife, for USGS, for Asian carp research. Obviously, an increase in the GLRI is just extremely important for combating Asian carp from moving towards the Great Lakes, because obviously the GLRI provides just so many resources to so many different federal agencies and also to state agencies, including Michigan DNR, Ohio DNR, Illinois DNR, for various activities, monitoring activities. The ACRCC, the Asian Carp Regional Coordinating Committee, is continuing to have a very comprehensive action plan moving forward. The Fish and Wildlife Service, along with the US EPA, who chair the ACRCC, come to Washington at least once a year to brief me and all the congressional staff on the activities that they're doing in the cause and elsewhere. Another big emphasis that they've moved forward with recently is they're really also putting a focus on grass carp in Lake Erie. I know that obviously we have some appropriators that are Ohio Lake Erie folks that have really put and Michigan folks too, that have stressed that grass carp are a big issue and very detrimental to the habitat of the Great Lakes. So
Okay.
I feel like obviously there's a lot of work to continue to be done at the federal level, at the state level, to stop the movement of Asian carp. But it is one of the probably largest priorities of the Great Lakes Task Force right now, especially with success stories with the GLRI getting full funding and actually increased funding, or potentially increased funding, or having the Sioux Lock project move forward. I think Asian carp continues to be one of the top priorities for members of the delegation. And I think there's a lot of good things have happened, but there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. And obviously, Brennan Road, there's going to be challenges. It's the cost that the Army Corps has laid out, and the new plan is very concerning. So it's going to be it's certainly going to be a difficult process through the WRDA process to get it authorized. It's going to be important that the Army Corps realizes that it's important to include PED funding in their FY20 work plan, so that there can be a start for the Brandon Road project. But yes, that's kind of a large overview. I didn't know if there's any specific things that you wanted me to touch upon about that, or what.
I appreciate the overview there. That's exactly what I was looking for. We have time for maybe a question or two. Anyone questions for Matt?
Senator Charbonneau, this is Lisa. I don't see any hands raised, so I'll just remind the attendees that in your GoToWebinar grab tab, which should be showing on your screen top right corner, if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute your line, or if you want to type a question to me, you can send it to gllc@csg.org. But I'm not seeing any questions right now, Senator. So if you would like to, we can move on to the regional reports.
Matt, thank you again for being part of one of our webinars. We all really appreciate it. You're certainly welcome to stay on the line or just drop off at any time. I'll move to the roundtable to talk briefly about what's going on in the various states around the area. Again, if you would keep your remarks brief, we'll proceed and start with alphabetically. So, Senator Fine, are you on the phone?
Senator Fine is on. I can see her, but I cannot unmute her line. So, Senator Fine, if you can hear me, and I hope you can, please try dialing in at 877-309-2074 and use the access code 578-039-614. And I should have said that number goes for anyone else on the executive committee who is only calling in and not viewing the slides. The phone number is 877-309-2074. access code 578-039-614. Okay, Senator, if you want to move on to
We can
Representative
always
Schultz.
back to Laura if she is able to log on. Indiana, we passed, first of all, we passed the resolution regarding recognizing the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River for contributions to the state of Indiana and urging the governor to declare September 7th, 2019 as the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Appreciation Day in Indiana. We did pass two significant water bills. They're statewide issues, certainly affect the Great Lakes, but it's something that we've been working on for a good 6-7 years. And what we did this year, there were two companion bills. One was to say that we need to divide the state up into regions that make sense, whether they're watersheds or whatever, and have those regions begin to work to cooperate and to just start focusing on how, as a region, we address the water infrastructure issues. We've had a $2.3 billion identified as infrastructure problem. We're focusing on the collaboration. Indiana Finance Authority has become the, I'll use the term water czar because it's descriptive of what they will be, the governor's point organization for all water issues. To this point, we haven't had anything like that in the state, and it has come out of this legislation, which is going to be a huge move forward. I used a chart I referred to as the Mad Max chart that showed something like 15 different agencies in the state and federal that dealt with water issues in Indiana, and many of them not communicating with each other. This is intended to focus on that. The second one was creating a water infrastructure asset fund, and we do fund it with $20 million in the second year of the biannual budget, and hopefully it will be an ongoing piece of our budget annually, and that fund will be used to certainly leverage federal funds and offer low interest, maybe no interest loans to communities around the state that have to deal with their infrastructure problem, and the various things that I talked about, the cooperation, the collaboration, the regional. We didn't make any of those mandatory, but when they come to the IFA with requests for money, there's a checklist that they will go through and check boxes if they are in fact collaborating, if they have in fact asset management plans. So it's kind of a gentle way of getting them to do what we want them to do, and I think I'll stop there. So Representative Schultz, Minnesota.
Yep, I'm going to unmute her line.
Okay.
Representative Schultz, your line's unmuted.
Okay, so we passed 4 major bills related to water. The first bill requires schools to take action when testing reveals high levels of lead in drinking water. The second bill was part of our omnibus environmental and natural resources bill, which includes funding for invasive species research and prevention and many other water project protections. The third bill, we have dedicated funding for projects of the Clean Water Fund, which includes wetlands protection, habitat restoration, and water quality. And the fourth bill allows drainage authorities to order permanent perennial buffer strips. So these are actions to control nutrient runoff and accelerate compensation for ditch buffer strips to farmers, among other provisions. And then for the we have the September 7th Great Lakes St. Lawrence Appreciation Day. That resolution bill passed the House, but it got stuck in the Senate rules. So I talked to the governor this week, and he's going to issue a proclamation to recognize September 7th during his administration until we can get that in the permanent statute. So that's my report.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Ohio, is Representative Sheehy on? Okay, let's move on.
I think
Ontario.
Senator Charbonneau, I think Senator Fine. Oh no, where did she go? I just had her and now she's not there. My apologies. Let's go to Representative Beth Myers, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, here you go. Representative Myers, I just unmuted your line, so you should be able to speak. Representative Myers? She's there, and I wonder if she's needs to call in. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Myers, the access code is 578-039-614. So if I'll go ahead and we can move on to MPP Jennifer French.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Oh, good. You can hear me. Yes, and I'm looking forward to getting together in the early fall. So we have had an interesting time at the Ontario legislature, and yesterday actually was our last day. We have now, our legislature has risen for this summer session, and interestingly, our session has been extended, our summer session break, I guess, has been extended until almost the end of October after the federal election. They've made that decision. So we have almost 5 months in our communities. So some of the bills that have been tabled are mid-process. They're not government bills. They're what we call private members bills. So we have a few. There's, if we were talking about the tracking, the legislative tracker, these might be for that, but we have a bill 128 that was tabled by a government member, the Ontario Water Resources Amendment Act. There is another bill 71 that is a Paris Gulf Moraine Conservation Act, so they're specific and local. But when it comes to government legislation that has been passed, there is Bill 108 had to, I forget what they called it. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but it was about housing, but it made sweeping changes to some of our conservation. We have conservation authorities across the province responsible for everything from, of course, flood management and water quality and forest and conservation, and has made some significant changes. So that'll be something that over the summer that our communities and the conservation authorities figure out what that looks like. And that'll probably be something that comes up when we get together at our face-to-face in terms of some of the changes affecting us. But we've had funding changed, funding reduced for flood management and things like that, which has been a challenge for the province, of course, with the effects of climate changing. We're having the same issues that we're seeing around probably where all of you are from as well. But anyway, so that's what we have right now before the legislature is a few private members' bills.
Hey, Jeremy.
Jennifer, appreciate the report. Is Kurt Sani on?
I don't see him in the list, but I do think that Representative Beth Myers from Wisconsin is audible now.
Okay, Beth?
Representative Myers, are you there? Well, I know I heard something. Senator, perhaps we could go to Philip in Quebec, who's sitting in for M&A Gilles Bélanger. Philip, are you there?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, just to specify, I'm sitting in actually for the whole and for the National Assembly of Quebec. I believe Alexandre Roy, who is on the M&A Bélanger staff, is also listening. But I'll still be doing the summary.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, currently, I'll start with a sort of a founding legislature and legislation in Quebec about water. So in 2002, Quebec launched its national water policy, which resulted from a public consultation and aimed to protect the resource and manage it in a sustainable development perspective. Since then, more than 100 concrete accomplishments stemmed from this policy, but I'll focus on the more recent ones today. So in June 2017, the National Assembly unanimously adopted the Act respecting the conservation of wetlands and bodies of water. This law consists in a modernization of the measures taken for conservation of these water resources and ecosystems, in particular by devolving power to regional and municipal water protection entities, and providing them with financial resources. So similar to what Senator Charbonneau was mentioning earlier, basically it's regional watershed organizations. Then in 2018, the Quebec government announced the implementation of the Quebec Water Strategy, which is the successor of the aforementioned 2002 water policy. It'll be implemented through 3 consecutive action plans, the first one alone receiving investments of 552 million Canadian dollars. Among other things, it'll involve the creation of the Quebec Water Council, which will have the mission of democratizing the management of the resource. And finally, the Quebec Drinking Water Strategy was renewed for 2019 to 2025, and it aims to reduce water consumption by 20% in relation to 2015. So that sums it up for Quebec.
Thank you very much. Have we been able to establish contact with Representative Myers?
I'm here.
Okay. Beth, you want to?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the state of Wisconsin, we are working on our bipartisan joint resolution for Great Lakes St. Louis Appreciation Day. That hasn't made it to the floor in either house yet, but we hope to have that passed before the September date. Governor Evers has made it a priority for clean water in Wisconsin, which includes the creation of some full-time staff positions to examine water contaminants, as well as assistance with manure storage facilities, which is an issue in Wisconsin. We have 5 areas of concern as it relates to the Great Lakes. One of them is the St. Louis River on Lake Superior. The others are all with Lake Michigan, Lower Menominee River, Lower Green Bay and Fox River, Sheboygan River, and the Milwaukee Estuary. These issues include pollutants and improper and unchecked land use, urbanization, logging, and invasive species. At the federal level, we're happy that the EPA has designated Sheboygan River as a Superfund site where they are engaging in cleanup activities. At the state level, our Department of Natural Resources is leading remediation efforts in 4 of those 5 areas I mentioned, and that is my update.
Thank you very much, Representative Myers. I appreciate that. Lisa, do you know if we have established contact with anyone that we haven't
Well,
been able to?
I think I've sent the number to folks in case they're only listening in. So maybe we'll try Senator Laura Fine one more time. Are you able to speak, Senator?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did I do it? I did it, hooray. Yeah, so I guess the update from Illinois is we were able to pass the resolution, so it is on the books now.
Good.
And so that was a good step for us, and we are looking forward to hosting the caucus in Chicago this year.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Anybody else? Lisa?
I don't know if Representative Sheehy or Sunny is just calling in, but I don't see them in the list that's viewing. So I think in the interest of time, we can just move on then to the next item.
The business session. We have two items on the agenda. First, we'll hear from the task force on lead about the model policy that they developed to reduce the population's exposure to lead in drinking water. And giving today's report is Minnesota Representative Jennifer Schultz. Jennifer?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Excellent. So here's just the background from the task force. Last fall, the caucus's task force on lead, we've been working on a plan for region-wide collaboration on ways to prevent exposure to lead in drinking water. And most of the task force members participated in last year's pilot Great Lakes St. Lawrence Policy Institute. So we recognize that states and provinces are at different stages of addressing this problem of lead in drinking water. But we're hoping that our work will help us implement consistent science-based measures to better protect all our citizens, especially vulnerable populations like children and low-income families. So the phase one, the elements of the model policy that we developed in March, we finished drafting the model policy, which contains 3 elements. The first, it would require testing of all schools, public and private, for lead in drinking water. And this requirement goes beyond what some states are currently doing by requiring all schools to test, not just elementary schools or schools that were built before a certain year. We also recommend testing to a standard of 5 parts per billion, which is lower than what many jurisdictions are currently doing. We recognize that an even lower standard would be ideal, but we don't feel that a lower standard would be feasible at this time. The model policy also requires testing of all licensed daycare centers, including in-home child care providers, and testing would be at the same 5 parts per billion standard. And finally, the policy encourages all municipalities to conduct a service line inventory to identify the presence of lead service lines. Because the region's jurisdictions are at different stages with regard to lead prevention policies, our model policy is intended to present a menu of items from which our members from each jurisdiction may choose specific provisions to implement. In April, the Executive Committee approved our recommended policy, and so now our intention is for the members of the task force and the Executive Committee to collaborate on incorporating desired elements of the policy into their jurisdiction statutes, and to do this at the earliest date feasible. I encourage all of you to watch for future opportunities to sign on as co-sponsors of legislation that would implement elements of the GLLC's model policy. And Lisa will follow up on this call with a message to all caucus members to share the model policy and other materials related to this work. Phase 2, looking ahead to our next steps, the task force members will hold a workshop the morning of September 13th in Chicago to assess our progress and to kick off phase 2 of our action plan. That phase will focus on ways to fund the full replacement of lead service lines. And at the workshop, we'll also hear about the experience that daycare providers in Illinois have had with the state's testing requirement. We're also conducting some educational activities this year. First, we're organizing a session on lead service line replacement at the GLLC annual meeting on September 14th. So I hope many of you will be able to attend that meeting. In closing, we're very grateful to the Joyce Foundation for funding our pilot test and helping us to focus on lead in drinking water this year. These activities would not have been possible without the financial support we receive from the foundation. I also want to thank Elizabeth Caesar, Senior Program Manager at the Joyce Foundation, for connecting us with speakers and other resources. And that's my update.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. You've gotten a lot done, and congratulations and thank you. I don't know, now we'll turn to the last item. Is Robin Gable on the call?
No, this is Lisa. Unfortunately, Representative Gable is called away, so I'm going to give the the overview of the annual meeting and let everybody know what the plans are. So the caucus is holding its 2019 annual meeting in Chicago. Wyndham Grand Riverfront Hotel will be the site, and the dates are September 13th and 14th, which is a Friday-Saturday combination. Registration for all the caucus's members opened this past Monday, and registration for everybody else will open on July 1. The agenda right now has well, it hits upon all 5 of the issue areas on the caucus's policy agenda for 2018 through 2022. On September 13th, there will be a site visit. I'm very excited about this. It'll be longer than our typical site visits at these meetings, starting at 12 and ending at 6. We'll be heading out to see the electric dispersal barriers that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers maintains to prevent Asian carp from and other aquatic invasive species from transferring between the Mississippi River watershed and the Great Lakes. We'll also be seeing the Brandon Road Lock and Dam, which we had heard about earlier in Matt McKenna's report, and we'll see some other sites related to the efforts to stop Asian carp and other species. Then, of course, there's the opening reception that everyone is welcome to attend, and you can bring guests or spouses to that. Then on Saturday, the executive committee will meet in the morning from 7 until 8:15 for a breakfast meeting, and the caucus will have a full day on the 14th covering topics such as water consumption. There will be more programming related to the model policy and the work of the task force on lead that Representative Schultz just reported on. We'll also be having a report from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers organization on the implementation of the Water Resources Compact. We have nutrient pollution on the agenda. Nicole Zaccarda from the Great Lakes Commission will be providing a sort of a primer for members. This is in connection with the work that the caucus is doing right now to launch the Patricia Burkholtz Institute for Great Lakes St. Lawrence Policy, which this year will focus on nutrient pollution. We have coastal communities and their needs on the agenda. The Great Lakes Commission is also going to be reporting on the economic benefit of Great Lakes restoration, so that'll be part of that session. And we have an interesting speaker lined up to speak during lunch, and the focus will be on the work that was involved in reversing the flow of the Chicago River and dealing with the sanitary issues in Chicago and continuing today, sort of tracing the history of draining Chicago and making sure that the water is safe for the residents of the city and the suburbs to drink. So it'll be a very, very good meeting. I encourage everyone to check out the agenda. All the caucus members should have received that from me directly on Monday, and you'll be getting reminders from me. And that's all I had. Looking forward to seeing everyone there.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Lisa, for that update. You know, when you sit back and listen to all this stuff, we have an amazing amount of things going on, and it's because of the hard work of everybody that's part of this caucus. And thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you for all the support that you've been. I think that concludes the agenda. Does anyone have any comments before we end the call? If not, Lisa, do you have any final remarks?
I will just ask everyone to please mark your calendar for September 6th, which will be the caucus's next quarterly web meeting. And I hope everybody will have an excellent weekend. This concludes today's web meeting, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.